Hello everybody, my name is Kyle, and as most of you know, this is my 1986 Pontiac Fiero GT. I've owned this thing for over 8 years now, and I've done a ton of work to it, and it's been a fantastic project. And this is a 3800 Series 2 supercharged V6 that I'm going to be installing in the back of this car. One of the biggest things I hear when I'm talking to people about my car is that they're surprised that I have not swapped out the stock V6 for something different. And over the past few years, I've been searching for a 3800 and I have not been able to find one. I've had 3 different times when I almost have gotten it and then the people back out at the last second, or it sells, or something comes up where I can't get it. And this one, I have gotten a fantastic deal on. I only paid $200 for this engine. It has 120,000 miles on it. So for the age, it's relatively low and it is in fantastic shape. Now this is a Series 2 3800 that came out of a 1999 Buick Park Ave Ultra. Now I did the swap before on my first ever car, which was a 1985 Pontiac Fiero GT. And I used a Series 2 3800 that was out of a 99 Grand Prix GTP. I am extremely excited to get this engine into this car, but obviously we have to do some stuff to this engine first before it's ready to be thrown in. The 3800 swap is probably the most common and most popular swap that people do in Fieros, and there's good reason for it. The 3800 makes over 100 more horsepower stock than the Fiero V6 does. The engines are pretty common, so you can find them on Marketplace or in junkyards. They are everywhere, so parts are easy to find and they're easy to find. And since the swap has been done so many times, people have started making swap parts to make it even easier. People make the wiring harness, the motor mounts, they make the custom thermostat housings, they make a bunch of different parts to make the swap even easier for people. And there's so many forum posts from people telling how to put these in a car, so it just makes it so much easier. And you guys can see this engine is not complete. I don't have a fuel rail, there's no wiring harness, there's a bunch of random missing parts, and that's because I kind of already went through and started cleaning this thing and kind of taking it apart to go through it. So this is a picture of what it looked like when I first got it, and you can see it's a lot dirtier, and I pressure washed it and did a little bit of cleaning to make it a little better, but we're gonna do a lot more to it. I am not gonna do a full rebuild on this. I've heard a whole bunch of stuff online that if you want a 3800 to last forever, you never open it up. I've also heard people that say that while it's out now, you should completely rebuild the entire thing and go from there. But what I'm going to do, since this engine is in really good shape and it has fairly low miles for the engine itself, I am just going to do all new gaskets. I'm going to clean it and do a top end rebuild and call it a day. If it doesn't work, then I'll have to get a different engine and maybe I'll build that one instead. But I think that's going to work well for this. Like I said, it's not going to be a crazy fast car, so I think that this will be okay. So there's tons of forum posts, there's tons of people that have very knowledgeable information on this swap, and what my goal is to try and take all the stuff that I find online and try and put it into a small video series of doing a 3800 swap from scratch. I'm going to try and document everything as well as I can, so if you are interested in doing a 3800 swap for yourself, you can click on my series and you can watch and hopefully learn how to do it. So what I'm going to do today is focus on the engine. I'm going to try and clean up this gross, gunky 3800 and try and make it look a little better. I already started taking it apart, as you guys have seen, but I'm going to take off the supercharger, clean it up, try and paint that, do the same thing to the valve covers, and I'm going to clean up just everything on this to try and make it look more presentable so it's ready to go into this car.
Later.
Well, hello there. For you guys, it's been a few seconds, but for me, it's been a few weeks, and the engine looks a little different than the last time you've seen it. So over the past few weeks, I've been steadily taking this engine apart, cleaning things, painting things, and sourcing things that my engine was missing. And I've gotten it to this point. It is painted black. I think it turned out pretty good. It's gonna look good for what we're doing. And I have all of these parts over here, which I have taken off and have painted and cleaned to get looking like this. I think they all look really nice. This is the fuel rail that I modified. I'll talk more about that later, but everything here is all ready to go onto the engine, which I think is gonna be awesome. And that's what we're gonna be doing today. We're gonna be starting to reassemble this engine. So I made a post on Instagram a little while ago asking about color schemes that I should do for the engine, for the supercharger, and for the valve covers. And I got a lot of suggestions, but no one actually suggested what I thought they were gonna suggest. So on my 2.8 right now, I painted it black and I have this cool red, orange, and yellow gradient on there that I think is pretty neat. And I wanted to continue that, and I did, and I think it turned out pretty cool. So look at this. Look at these. So I have spent a little while painting these up, and I think they turned out pretty awesome, and I think this is gonna make the entire engine bay look awesome. I really like this color gradient, and I think it's really retro, and I think it's gonna fit the whole style of the car really well, and I think it's gonna make it really pop. So I didn't paint this black, but I have a really dark gray, and there's some metallic in it, and I think that's gonna contrast really well on the engine being completely black. But I don't know, do you guys think these are gonna look good? I think they look pretty nice. So I don't really know if there's a right way or a wrong way to start putting things on this, but I'm just gonna start. So I think the first thing I'm gonna do is the thermostat housing, just because I think that'll be really easy to do. I got a new thermostat over here. I'm gonna be running a slightly lower thermostat. This one is a 180 thermostat, and the stock one I believe is, let's see, a 195. It's a slightly lower thermostat. This is what I heard a lot of people recommend, so I'm gonna be going with it. So I did get a thermostat housing gasket. However, on my engine, it just had this O-ring, and that's all that was used to seal this thermostat. I tried to line up the thermostat housing gasket, and it just didn't really work. And then like the thermostat would just kind of be loose in here anyways. So I think it'd be better to use that with my new thermostat. And it looks like that O-ring just kind of slides right over it anyways. So yeah, I think it's gonna be just fine like that. So I'll be able to just put it right in like this. And then I believe this guy just goes right over the top of it. Then I got this little heat shield that goes over this sensor. Just slides right over these two bolts and goes on like that, and then gets tightened up. Okay, up next is this oil filter bracket thing. This is what the oil filter screws onto. This is the one that you need. It's off of a Grand Prix. This is the one that I have. My engine is from a Buick, and you can see that the oil filter is kind of tucked down here. Apparently you need to change this bracket because on this, it helps clear the motor mount and also clear the axle in some cases. So I'm gonna pop this thing off and replace it with this one. Here's the part number if you are interested. I just pulled this one out of a junkyard. Okay, it's stuck on there. There we go. Alrighty everyone, I got the surface all cleaned on there. I have my new gasket that's right here. Here's the part number if you want that exact one. Here it is. It lines up nicely. I'm gonna slide it on right here. And let's put this new gasket on. And finally, I'm gonna torque this thing down. It is recommended that you do this at 11 foot-pounds. Up next are valve cover gaskets. Here's the ones that I went with. They are blue and rubber, and they come with all of these little grommets that go into the bolts on the valve cover. So let's get these swapped. These are being torqued to 7 foot-pounds, which is recommended, and I torqued them from the inside out. This would also be a good time to mention that normally on a 3800, this valve cover with the oil fill would be on the back side of the engine for the Fiero. So when you're standing in the back looking forward, you don't want the oil fill to be back here. So swap the valve cover to the front so you'll be able to fill up the car with oil. I'm getting ready to throw the supercharger on, but before I do that, I want to do the EGR delete because it's going to be the easiest right now because there's a port right here that the supercharger is going to be on, and the other one is right here. And I just think it'll be a lot easier with not having this thing in the way. So the way I did my EGR delete was I literally just took a piece of metal plate, I cut it, drilled a hole so I can sandwich it in between this piece from the EGR valve and right here on the intake. Basically, I'm just gonna bolt it on how it usually would, but there's gonna be this plate in the way. I did this completely free, so that's why I'm doing it. Obviously, you can cut this to make it look a little better, but I think this should work fine. My RTV literally exploded and sent RTV everywhere on this, but you know what they say, the more the merrier. So I'm just going to put this on here and sandwich it right into the intake and hopefully block this EGR port off. So yeah, I used way too much RTV, but this should work. And now I have one more port to do right here on the exhaust manifold, which is the same idea, except the bolt goes through the manifold, and I'm gonna sandwich this plate right in between it, kind of like that. So yeah, let's get that done. Again, with way too much RTV, but the EGR delete is now complete. That's all it is just 2 plates to cover up the EGR ports. So now I'm gonna get ready and throw on the supercharger. I went through and I chased all of the holes, and now all the bolts go in really smooth. So I think it's time to just throw the new gasket on and get this supercharger in. All right, first I'm gonna put the 2 coolant O-rings in. I think they just pop right in like this. All right. Now let's get the supercharger gasket, which is right here. Line it up with the 2 dowels. And it should sit down like this. Let's get the supercharger on. Try to line this up nicely. Just like that. And now we can throw all of the bolts in. And the 2 longer bolts go in the front and the back of the supercharger. The longest one that is a stud goes right here by the throttle body, and the other long one goes right at the front near the snout. Let's tighten this thing on. All right, supercharger is on and all torqued down. For those wondering, I torqued the supercharger down to 17 foot-pounds, just like this manual says. Now it's time to put the fuel injectors into the fuel rail. So this is the fuel rail that I'm going to be using. This is a stock fuel rail that I slightly modified to make it a little easier for the swap. So on the stock fuel rail, these 2 fuel lines right here come straight over across the engine. And instead of running the fuel lines all the way around and back towards the firewall of the car, I don't really like how that is. So I cut the little bracket where you mount this to the supercharger. I cut that, and then I used a brake line bender and just bent them over to the side. So now they come out to the side like this. So instead of having to put fuel line all the way around the engine, I'm only gonna have to put it out the side and back. So I think that's gonna be nice. I am not gonna buy an aftermarket rail just because of how expensive they are. And this is another area where I'm gonna be saving a little bit of money on the swap. But I think this is gonna do well. And I'm gonna put the fuel injectors in now. I'm just gonna use some motor oil, lube up the O-rings, and pop them back in. Alrighty everyone, all the fuel injectors are in. I also have all of the clips in for the fuel injectors as well. I lubed up the bottom O-rings now, and I also lubed up just the holes for the fuel injectors. So let's throw this thing on. I don't really know exactly how I'm supposed to know if these are in. They are kind of clicking and like popping into a spot, so I almost think that's what it means. And if that's the case, then the fuel rail is installed. I want to put on the supercharger pulley, and I also have an idler pulley that came in to install as well. I already threw one on, but I figured since I'm doing this, might as well put on the last ones here. So to put the supercharger pulley on, since I'm going to be running a smaller pulley, I have to put this hub on, and the hub doesn't just go on because it has to be pressed. And to press it, you're supposed to use the same kit as your puller for the pulley, and I kind of snapped the thing off inside of the supercharger, so that's not the greatest. However, I think I'll be able to makeshift something with this random assortment of washers and stuff. So bear with me. We're gonna see if this works. Okay, I think this is gonna work. So basically, I have a bolt threaded in with a big washer on the hub, and I have a nut here. So I'm tightening the nut, and I'm holding the bolt and trying to just move everything that way. Just like that, the pulley's on. So that method did work. It took a little while, but it did work. I put a little bit of engine oil on here and it made it a lot easier. So definitely do that. It said in the instructions that, you can do that to make it a little easier. So now I'm gonna go ahead and put my pulley on. I have a couple pulleys here. There was a 3-2 pulley that came with this installer, but since I'm not gonna do a lot of crazy mods to this, I'm leaving stock headers and everything, I'm gonna go with a 3-5 pulley. Now, a lot of people say that if you want to do a smaller pulley, then you have to do headers and an intake and everything. However, in a Fiero application, I heard from people online that a 3-4 pulley is the smallest you can go with doing stock headers on a Fiero. Now, that's because obviously the exhaust is a lot shorter and less restrictive, and you have to make an intake anyways, which makes that less restrictive. So I'm gonna go with a 3-5. I think that's gonna be a safe bet, and I think it's gonna be perfect for what I'm gonna do. So let's get this thing installed. All right, everyone, my alternator just came in the mail, and I can't throw that onto my engine because I don't have any of the bracketry for where it would go. But also, I don't really want to mount the alternator on the top of the engine where it would be factory, so that is why I have these. These are Fiero Raj brackets, and he has been a name in the Fiero community for years. And he creates all the brackets that you need to be able to put a 3800 inside of your Fiero. This is the lower alternator mount. This bolts onto the bottom of the engine and comes with all of the hardware. This is the dog bone bracket, which allows you to use the stock Fiero dog bone. And this is the motor mount that goes on the bottom of the engine right here that allows you to bolt on the stock Fiero motor mount to let this sit on your cradle without modification. To start off, we're gonna mount our lower alternator bracket. This bolts onto this area of the front of the engine and goes on in this orientation, just like that. I'm just gonna snug these up first, and then I'll go back and I will fully tighten them down once I get the alternator on. Now, for the main bolt that holds on the alternator right here, it comes with 3 washers, and it looks like those are to fill in this gap that is between the alternator and the bracket. And you can see that it can adjust both ways like this. And down here, this bolt kind of fell out because it's loose right now, but there is some adjustability in the mounts themselves. So it looks like this can be moved a little bit to line up with your pulleys better. I don't exactly know which way is correct for where I put these washers, if it's like this or like this. Just by eyeballing it, it looks like having them on the inside lines it up better, but I don't know for sure. I'm going to put them there for now, but just keep in mind that I could be wrong and I could be changing this down the road. I have all the motor mounts a little loose to let me adjust this to get this main bolt started. You can see I put the washers on the inside, and it looks like that bolt is started. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten everything down. And just like that, our lower alternator is bolted on. I have everything all tightened down. I am really impressed with how everything's fitting together, and I think this is a great alternative than having the alternator sit right on the top of the engine. Moving on, we're gonna get on our dog bone bracket. That is this guy right here, and this bolts on just like that, I believe. It has these 3 bolts right here. The 2 smaller ones go right here like this, and this really long one goes right in the middle, and this is where you add a tensioner. In the instructions, it says that you should use a tensioner from a 95 Ford Taurus, and I have that coming in the mail, but in the meantime, we're still gonna bolt on these brackets. All right, dog bone bracket is bolted on. I just have the tensioner bolt in here loose right now until I get the tensioner. And this is how it looks. This is loose as well. This is the piece that bolts to your dog bone. And it looks like it's actually adjustable. So you can move this front bolt either forward or back to help bolt it into your dog bone. So I'm just gonna leave that loose here now as well until I get it in the car and I can tell which orientation is the best. The last engine bracket we have to put on is this one right here. This is the one that goes on the bottom side of the engine like this, and that allows you to bolt it onto the motor mount. Now for this, it bolts on with 3 bolts on this side and 2 on the other side of the engine, and it looks like I'm gonna have to take off the AC bracket right now, which is just 3 M12 bolts, which I did already take one out to test the threads, so that's why that one's out. But I believe I'm gonna have to take these ones out too, and then I think I'm gonna be able to just put the mount on the back side and put this over top of it. I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm gonna try and do. And on this side, it looks like I'm just gonna have to bend this little heat shield out of the way and put the bracket behind that. So that shouldn't be a big deal. So on the engine bracket, the metal's pretty thick. So I went ahead and got a few different length bolts to try, and hopefully I'll be able to make this thing work. These things do not want to come out easy. The engine bracket is all in place. The only issue I'm having is that the bolts holding on the AC bracket are not long enough. With this thing bolted in place, there is just not enough threads going into the block. So I'm gonna have to go out and get some new bolts for that. But other than that, it is fitting very nicely. And that is where we're gonna end the first episode of our engine swap series. Sorry for the brief cutoff in the last clip. The file kind of got corrupted. It's a long story. But nonetheless, we made a ton of work to this engine, completely transforming it from when we first found it. And we're gonna continue doing that in the next episode. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you later.